All right, great. Did you want to say a few words before we get started, or just go ahead?
No, it's okay. You can go ahead.
All right, sweet. Well, hey, everybody. My name is John Chan. I am an NYU alum from 2012, so have been out of NYU and Gallatin, which is actually the school that I studied at for quite some time, but really excited to be here. I was on the executive board for Tech at NYU since I was, I think, a junior all the way through to when I was a senior, helping out with hackathons, demo days, anywhere where I could really sort of help out here. And I'm really excited to talk to all of you today. I don't have any slides. I don't really like doing slides when it comes to such a small group, and I like to keep things pretty informal here. So, what I'd really like to do is really spend some time, talking a little bit about my own background, sort of like how I got to where I'm at right now, just as a little bit of context. But I'd really love to spend the remaining time and the majority of the time that we have together really answering any questions that you may have here, because I know how boring it probably is for all of you to just sit in front of a Zoom meeting while someone just speaks at you. I think you get enough of that in class. So you probably don't want to hear that from me either. And of course, if you have any questions, anything that you want to chat about, feel free to put inside a chat. I'm more than happy to just pay attention to that. Or maybe, Andrew, if you can help me sort of like pay attention to what that is too, more than happy to answer those questions. But we'll go ahead and get started there. Anyone have anything they want to ask before we actually get into it, or things that you want me to cover before I just start, talking for the next 15 minutes or so? Anyone? Okay, cool. Then I will just get into, I guess, my life story when it comes to being an engineer and just sort of getting to where I'm at now. So a little bit more background about me before I actually get into sort of like getting into NYU and then also doing the job search and then sort of what it is that I'm doing right now. The first thing that I'll say is that I'm a self-taught dev. I did not plan on being a technologist or really an engineer, let alone sort of in engineering management. I'm probably dating myself, but if any of you remember MySpace and Zanga, like that's what it is that I was doing when GeoCities websites were a thing and web rings and dynamic HTML. Like that was the environment that I grew up in, learning to code and really getting acquainted with technology. And this really started around when I was 14, 15 years old. So around middle school time was really when things got started for me when it comes to learning to code, thinking about technology, getting really interested in it. And I think another really important thing to call out, which coincides with a lot of me becoming more of a technologist or thinking more about that, is that I came out as a gay man during that time too. I came out very early. And I grew up in a rather conservative area in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Lots of other folks that looked like me with immigrant parents that were not very happy about the kind of news that you would be sharing in that space. And I bring that up because it's a really big part of why I'm currently in technology and a lot of the work that I'm doing, which I'll get into a little bit later on. So, I graduated from high school in 2008, having, dabbled a little bit in code, mostly, copying, pasting CSS and JavaScript into that look and feel box in the Zanga page. And, really just kept being a hobby from there. As I mentioned before, I joined Gallatin, not really quite knowing what it is. As you can imagine, a lot of Gallatin folks don't really know what it is that they're really interested in until they figure out what their concentration is later on. But I knew that I was always interested in startups. It was during a time when Foursquare had just become a company, Twilio had just become a company. This is when you were seeing a lot of investments from places like Union Square Ventures and a lot of the companies that you're probably thinking of as very established now. So it was a really exciting time to not only be at NYU, but also to be someone that was interested in learning how to code, and especially as somebody that was on the e-board of Tech at NYU at the time. This was right when, some of you might know Trevor, who was one of the founders of Tech at NYU, as well as Vivek, who I think is still very much in touch with the Tech at NYU e-board that's here. That's when, that group was sort of coming together, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. During that time, I think I just coded as a hobby. I took one computer science class, which was iPhone development or iOS development at the time. And it was funny, I was able to take that class because it had no prerequisites on it. And I remember going up to the professor being like, I promise I know how to code, just let me into this class because I can't make heads or tails of Objective-C and what in the world this is, so I actually need some help here. But that was really the only computer science course that I took when I was at NYU. Everything else is pretty much self-taught. And I imagine that for a lot of the folks that are here, you're probably noticing that as well, right? you're probably in your computer science courses learning a lot about algorithms and data structures and memory management and all of that, but you're not getting a lot of how do I actually build something that people will use or that I would be excited about actually starting a company around. And that's really what I found Technomu the most helpful for. Fast forward to 2012 when I actually graduated and I ended up being a technology consultant with a firm called Deloitte. Some of you might be familiar with that when it comes to accounting, but they also have a consulting arm. And I was part of their first class of consultants that were joining to help their clients with developing mobile apps and getting involved with more modern JavaScript, Angular, React, all that fun stuff. And it wasn't something that I really enjoyed. I thought that being a part of a consultancy would allow me to get a lot of exposure to different kinds of problems, and that didn't end up happening nearly as much as I thought it would. So during this entire time, I was still coding as a hobby. I still didn't really sort of realize that I was going to become an engineer. What that resulted in was me continuing to just work on it as a hobby. I built sites on the side after hours just because I found that it was something fun to do in the same way that I did when I was a teenager, right? And then one day, I'd say about a year and a half after I graduated and a year and a half into my time at Deloitte, I built one particular site called Bento. Some of you might be familiar with it. I basically curated all the free learning coding tutorials that I could think of and put them on a free website, organized them in a way that was really easy to understand, like what you should learn in what order, and it blew up on Hacker News and on Reddit. It hit #1 on Reddit, I think in half an hour, and then it also hit the front page. #1 on Hacker News, then I think a top 10 for Reddit on the front page on the same day. That was a crazy experience. I could probably spend a whole hour just talking about what that was like. But that's really what gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of these other companies that eventually started reaching out to me. Luckily enough, one of those places was actually Stack Overflow that reached out to me. And in about 2 weeks afterwards, I realized that I actually had an offer from them to join them as an engineer on their careers team. And I've been with them ever since. It's been now 7 years that I've been with Stack Overflow, which I know is an eternity when it comes to the technology space, especially when you're talking about startups here. But it's a great place to work. It's a reason I've been here for 7 years. And now I'm not only an engineer here and sort of moved up the ranks. I was, a mid-level developer. About 3 or 4 years afterwards, I actually became a principal developer. I was only a principal developer for about 8 months before I moved into management. And now I'm the engineering manager for the public platform team, which is, for those of you that aren't familiar with Stack Overflow, I imagine a lot of you are. If you're here, it's the world's largest site for developers that exists. If you're Googling, when you're running into a bug in your computer science class or finding a problem that you can't solve and you're running into a page that helps you figure out, hey, I have a question, here's an answer about coding, that's the site that I work on and the team that I help lead when it comes to an engineer perspective. Just going full circle here, why I sort of brought up, my original history around this is that I view a lot of the work that I do at Stack Overflow as being really integral to changing how the engineering community thinks about diversity, equity, inclusion. Stack Overflow has the privilege of being a really, really large community of developers, one that every single developer probably goes to multiple times a day. And it's no secret for a lot of folks that are coming to Stack Overflow that it's not necessarily the friendliest place to be joining. You're probably noticing too that a lot of times in the startup world or in the engineering world, there's not a lot of inclusion and there's not a lot of equity when it comes to actually entering the space or feeling like you're part of it. It's part of a big reason why I didn't end up studying computer science in a formal setting. I didn't think that I fit in during that time. So one of the things I'm thinking a lot about, not only on Stack Overflow, but a lot of my other work, is how do we actually make the engineering community, the technology community more inclusive, diverse, and equitable? Because, as I imagine a lot of you are thinking about, especially given where you are in your careers, as students, you're realizing that, technology is really driving a lot of change in the world right now. So much of what we are seeing when it comes to, economic changes, political changes, all of that is really driven by technology. And if you're thinking about a technology industry that does not include people that look like every other person that you see on a regular basis, it's going to affect all the other things that technology changes too. So I view the work that I do at Stack Overflow not just from a technical perspective, but also from an equity perspective, almost a social justice perspective, which I think is very relevant given all the conversations that we're having right now. I'm thinking about how do we actually make an impact on Stack Overflow and the larger developer community when it comes to issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion. I can say a lot more about a lot of the other work that I'm doing. I do some work with the mayor's office, with the New York Tech Talent Pipeline, which is thinking about bringing local talent from New York City into the technology industry here in New York. I'm also in the leadership of Out in Tech, which is the largest LGBTQ tech organization, 40K members around the world. And I helped them with their mentorship program. And I was a part of the Tech NYU mentorship program, which I think some of you might have been as well. So really happy to see that work happening too. That is a lot of stuff that I threw at all of you. But again, just wanted to give you some background about what my journey has been like. Hopefully there are some things that you can take away from what I've said so far. And yeah, I'd really love to use, like I said, the time to really have a discussion with each of you. So if you all have questions, something you want to talk about, I mean, I'm here for the next 45 minutes. So I'd love to stop talking and yeah, start a conversation with all of you.
Lucy, go ahead.
I know you said you were like self-taught and like coding, so but was there like an aha moment, I guess you could say, where you realized that like tech was a real career opportunity for you, and like something you actually did want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. I think that it didn't really happen until it sort of happened for me personally. Like I said before, it's funny whenever I give these kinds of talks and people are like, oh, like, what internships did you take? And like, how did you actually get into the job that you're in? Is that like, I technically never really had to do a formal sort of like job search to get the positions that I have right now. So in terms of having an aha moment, it wasn't until, I released Bento and somebody actually came to me and was like, hey, you actually might be a pretty good engineer. There's a lot to add on to that, which is like it speaks, I think, a lot to like, hey, how much validation do you get as an early engineer or someone that's early in their career that wants to sort of do that? And I'd say the thing that's really important to realize is that I don't know if there is necessarily an aha moment. I think that one of the things you'll probably realize as you're learning to code is that it's a lifelong learning journey, right? I think the way that I started to learn to code was I wanted to put a button on this page and make it change colors, or I needed to figure out login, and eventually I can make that work, right? At some point you get to a place where you're like, I can build enough stuff that I can build almost anything that it is that I want. And that was the more aha moment for me was, hey, I may not know how to do something or build something, but I know I'm resourceful enough to figure that out. I think that's the more important aha moment rather than being like, oh, I can get a job at this particular point. Does that help answer your question?
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Grace?
I guess my question is, how long did it take you to like get down everything, like get the code down, like the basics down, and what resources did you use to learn?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for me, I'd say that it really took me, and again, this is in a very different time and place. It took me, I'd say, like 10 years to really get to a place where I probably would feel like I'm a full stack developer. I can like build a website end to end where it's like front end, back end, database deployment. I can do all of those things, right? And the reason that I'd say, I don't think that it's going to take you all 10 years now, right? Largely because I learned to code in a very different time and place. I learned to code when Stack Overflow did not exist, right? Like you couldn't Google and find, why this particular error was popping up. I had to go, try, as I'm sure almost all of you have, just try something, see if it works. You may not fully understand why it works, but eventually you do. Or you have to reach out to, a forum like something like Reddit, but nothing close to the quality of Reddit, or I would actually have to physically go find books to make sure that that would work. Thankfully, that's not the case now, right? It's completely different day and night when it comes to the resources that are available to you now. I mean, for one, Stack Overflow does exist. But if you're looking for more resources, like I was saying before, Bento is still something that I push to other folks. It's still something that I maintain on a occasional basis, not as frequently as I would like, if I'm being completely honest. But if you're looking for free coding tutorials and a roadmap for how to actually go about doing that, go to bento.io. It's something that I think it would still be helpful for you. Another really good place that I really like to show folks is roadmap.sh. That actually gives a really good high-level understanding of what are the different topics that you need to cover in order to be, say, a full stack developer or a front-end developer or a DevOps person. And that's probably the harder thing to realize, isn't like, I need to find a tutorial to help me learn Java or HTML or something else like that. It's more about which things should I learn, right? Do I learn HTML first, then CSS, then JavaScript, and then Java? Should I be learning Java or Ruby? Or am I even asking the wrong question, right? I think that's probably a much more valuable thing to be looking at, and roadmap.sh is a really good place to look. And of course, the last place that I'll also mention is like, I really love YouTube. Like, one of the things that I think it's kind of overlooked in a lot of ways. People always go to me like, oh, go to Free Code Camp, or go to, a place like Thinkful where you can pay for a boot camp or something else like that. These places are great, but very rarely will you actually get a really in-depth understanding of a particular topic. What's really great about YouTube is that they've put up, really in-depth courses for free, especially from a lot of the other top universities that are out there. MIT OpenCourseWare, Harvard's, courses are there as well. Those are all really good places to go to, and places that I still go to when I want to learn something. I'm trying to learn machine learning right now, how to actually, build neural networks and all of that to get an understanding of how we might implement that at a place like Stack Overflow. Those are all really good resources for you to take a look at. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Lucy?
Do you have like a favorite project that you've done in the past? Maybe it's Bento, or like that you're looking forward to doing or like currently doing?
Yeah, I'll talk about something that I'm more interested in doing rather than something that I've already done. Bento, of course, is probably the thing that I'm most proud of. It helped me get the job that I currently am right now, and I probably wouldn't be an engineer if that weren't the case. But something that I am really interested in doing next, I mean, some of it is the machine learning stuff, especially here at Stack Overflow, right? Here at Stack, we have the, unique opportunity to have an enormous amount of data, probably more data around developers than almost any other company on the planet. And that includes GitHub and Roku and all the other ones that are out there that do dev tools. And there's something really, really exciting about using the new research and the new tools that are coming out with machine learning to actually do things that we didn't think were possible with traditional programming, right? And for some of you that may not be familiar with how machine learning might work, it allows us to do things like recognize patterns in how people behave and actually predict how that stuff might happen. That might help us classify behaviors or code that is on our site and detect, hey, this is abusive content, or hey, this is something that is going to be offensive to somebody, and we can actually use machine learning to prevent that kind of thing. Right, that's something that I'm really, really interested in. There are some personal projects that I can talk about too. Like right now I'm learning around like Next.js and modern JavaScript, for Cell. Some really, really fascinating places in sort of the developer experience space, which is like, you don't need to be trudging and laboring through coding anymore. The tools are so good now that you can almost think about not coding and get to a place where you're just focusing on what you actually want to get done. And I could talk a little bit more about that if you want to, but I'd say, machine learning is probably the thing I'm most excited about right now. Other folks?
So I have a question. So when you were at like Gallatin,
Mhm.
how did you kind of frame like the classes you took? Like, did you take like CS class? Like you said, you only took one CS class. Like, how did you kind of figure it out through your 4 years?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like I said, I only, like, and you mentioned too, I only took one computer science course during that time. And there's a few reasons for why that was the case. I mean, for one, I really felt like I was getting a much sort of better computer science education, or at least a practical computer science education, by continuing to learn outside of class, right? Like, I don't know if there's going to be, I just don't know this, but like, I don't know if NYU is going to offer a course that's like, here's how you build a full stack web application in Node.js. Like, I don't know if that's actually an offering that you're going to get. You might be able to get something like, a web development course that's there that probably show you like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, maybe some databases, a little bit of a server, but not the kind of course that you're looking for that's going to really take you from end to end. Now, that's not to say that the computer science courses that do exist aren't helpful. They absolutely are. Having that academic underpinning and really having that really that understanding of these concepts like big O notation, like performance, like thinking about space-time complexity, all those things are really, really important, but they're not necessarily the things that will say like land you a job per se, or make you very successful as an engineer on the job, right? So for me, the things that I was looking to when I was deciding which classes I wanted to take was really what interested in me. And for me, it was largely philosophy classes. It was largely courses that were related to physics or related to English literature. That's essentially what I sort of gravitated towards. It was still very much connected in the end, I think. It's interesting now that it's sort of coming full circle, but those things ended up being very, very fruitful for me later on, especially in the position that I'm in right now. To give you an example, like I'm thinking a lot about machine learning, and I'm thinking a lot about artificial intelligence, and I'm thinking a lot about how that's going to be used ethically when it comes to dealing with this large data set that we have, especially when you have as much data as Stack Overflow does with, all the developers in the world essentially coming to our site. And the things that I was learning in philosophy class, and especially as a manager and a leader too, teaches me how to communicate, think about the right questions, think about ethics, all those different pieces. So my advice to you is think about, if you're talking about a computer science education, continue doing, taking the courses that you're looking at. It's, if you want that degree, it's really important. It's still, you're going to learn a lot that's really valuable, but don't think of it as that's the only thing that's going to get you through the door to get, say, a job or the next opportunity or make you perform really well once you're actually an engineer on the job. There are so many experiences that you get as being part of NYU, not only through extracurriculars like you get at NYU, the hobbies that you might take on. Like for me, it was doing coding hobby projects and doing things like hackathons, but even the liberal arts courses that you're taking, those soft skills and the things that you don't think of necessarily being super tied to computer science directly, right, are still going to be really, really valuable later on. And what you'll find too is that as you get further and further in your career, those things actually end up being far more important than your actual technical ability and aptitude.
Thank you.
Other folks? Or maybe I could throw a question out to you. What are y'all studying? What's everyone really interested in or thinking about doing when it comes to, say, summer is going to be coming up, and I don't know if all of you are thinking about internships or anything like that. I'm curious what you're all doing.
I guess I can start. So I recently accepted an internship with ServiceNow, which is a cloud platform as a service company based in San Jose, which is where I'm from. And yeah, I'll be working with their integration team. We're mostly working on like how to get data from one end to another in a really fast and efficient manner. So I'm glad to be like doing something that's implementing what I'm learning in class now.
Very nice. Cool.
I could go next. I'm actually a finance major, so I really want to go into the finance world in the future and just like business in the future, but I really want to go into the intersection of business and technology, which is why I really want to learn like a lot about coding and all of like computer stuff.
Interesting. Grace, do you have like a position that you have in mind, or you're still sort of exploring like what's out there in terms of what that might look like for you in the future?
For now, I'm thinking about consulting with like a combination of tech, because I know a lot of like the consulting firms offer a lot of positions within tech or just like technology consulting. Or I was thinking like non technical tech, like operations, products, and in that direction.
Right. I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah. I can tell you all sorts of things about sort of what tech consulting was like. Like I said, I was at Deloitte before I actually joined into it. But yeah, I'd also urge you to consider things like, product management seems to be a thing that a lot of people that were in technology consulting sort of move into afterwards. So I'd say think more about that too. Other folks?
I could go next. I actually recently got accepted as a research intern at Tandon, and under a professor. Actually, I took his class last semester. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's good to see you again too, by the way. For those of you that don't know, Goran and I have some calls on a regular basis. So that's great. That's great to hear. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I can go next. I'm kind of like Grace, where I, not necessarily business, but I do like the entertainment media scape and also technology, like computer science. So I really like, I think like a dream thing would be like if I could design games or like software engineer for like a game company, like video games. I think that would be super cool. Yeah, that just off the top of my head.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge space within the technology industry, right? I mean, some of the places that are really sort of like taking on a lot of developers are places like Riot Games, Blizzard, a lot of indie companies now too, that are out there. It's becoming cheaper and cheaper to actually develop a game and actually ship that out. There's some really interesting programs that are out there too. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with like ATP at NYU, which is part of Tisch. Like they're thinking a lot about that kind of thing. I forget it, there's a graduate program, but I think that they have some things that you might want to look into that is really at the intersection of media, art, and technology. There's also, I think, what is it? I think it's called Stack at Gallatin. And they're thinking about similar things, especially when you're talking about media and interactive, sort of like human-computer interface pieces. So there's a lot of opportunity that's there too.
Yes, I can go next. So I'm doing a summer internship with a chemical database company this upcoming summer. So I think it's really interesting thinking about how computer science can be applied in different fields. I'm also pretty interested in iOS development, which I'm learning on my own, and web development. So it's really cool to hear your journey about like how you self-learn so much.
Absolutely. How are you finding iOS development right now?
It's really cool.
Is it Swift that you're learning right now, or is it something else?
Yeah, Swift. They have a new framework, Swift UI, that I'm learning right now.
Oh gosh. So like I think I mentioned before, like I did the iOS development course, and this was way back when it was Objective-C, which is a nightmare. If you ever need to not do Objective-C, I highly recommend that you avoid it at all costs. But it's completely different now. I haven't tried to look at Swift or play around with it yet. Like I've been doing a lot of React Native, just so because I've been really interested in React and JavaScript as a whole. So that actually might be something for you to take a look at too, if you're interested in web and iOS too, or just mobile development generally. Like it's getting more and more cross-platform for you to learn a single technology and actually try several different, be able to ship on several different platforms. Other folks?
I can go next.
Oh yeah, you can go. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'll go after.
Yeah, so I'm a freshman, so I'm still like open to many different industries, but I do think I want to be like a software engineer in the future. So that's like my current plan.
Very nice. Are you taking any courses right now, like comp sci courses, or have you tried learning on your own a little bit?
Yeah, I'm currently taking data structures, and then I'm learning a bit of like HTML and then CSS on the side.
Very nice. Yeah, that's exactly how I got started too. So that's pretty much seems to be the entry point for almost everyone I know, especially when they get self-taught. That's great.
I've been getting into web development lately. I've been trying to make like a project that allows like people to post like the quote of the day, like their quote of the day, like quote of wisdom to like other people. And then I've been learning like basics of like HTML, CSS, and like React to try to like make that happen.
Yeah, very nice. How's the app itself going? How long have you been working on it?
I made like a basic layout, like a wireframe of it, but now I'm just like trying to learn everything and see like how I can build it.
Yeah. It's funny because like it's like I was saying before, a lot of people's first entry into web development is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it happens to be, I think it's sort of funny that folks end up working in those technologies first, because you probably hear a lot that HTML is like a programming language. CSS sometimes feels like magic. Sometimes you're not entirely sure why something works the way that it does. And then JavaScript has way too many ways to do the same thing all the time. So it's a hard landing, but it's something that'll be really rewarding because you can actually see like what it is that you're actually doing, right? And you can actually show other people what it is that you built. So again, great start. Anyone else?
I'm a STS major, so like it's kind of like the Gallatin of Tandon almost.
Nice.
I'm trying to, I think like I'm more interested in like the PM stuff, possibly like some UX stuff, but I also like computer science, but it's hard kind of balancing stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, what you'll probably find if you're interested in like the PM and the UX portions of this, it's going to be very, very valuable to still learn some computer science, or at least the fundamentals of it, right? Like most of I'd say the vast majority of the PMs that I know that are really successful, or even the UI UX folks, just people that are non-technical but work with engineers on a regular basis, really benefit a lot from having that program experience in the back. Like my sister, for example, she just finished a coding boot camp. And she wants to become a PM eventually. And she knows that she wants to continue being an engineer for at least a year or two, just get her feet wet. And when it comes to that, and then eventually move over to becoming a PM. So if you're thinking about like, how do you balance those two things, they're going to serve each other in the end, one way or the other. So I wouldn't be too worried about like, which one am I going to do first or which one's more important. I'd say learn all of it that you can. So folks. Maybe that might have been everybody. Yeah. What else is on people's minds? Anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah.
So actually, oh, go ahead.
Okay. I was wondering if you could go back to your freshman self back in college, would you do anything different about your journey? Or like if you could give like one piece of wisdom, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say if there was one thing that I wish I had done more as a freshman is really think about who I was making friends with and make more of them during my freshman year. I'd say, the people that I became the most close with and that I still keep in touch with after NYU are really the tech and NYU people. Like, like as I mentioned before, Vivek Patel and, Bell, who, they were both in Tech and NYU and now they're married. Those are the people that I still keep in touch with on a regular basis, 10 years after Tech and NYU had finished. And I'm actually thinking a lot about how to bring the alumni together. And those are the folks that are now, VPs of engineering at other places, or they are, thinking they're the head of, machine learning and AI at other places. And those are people that I can go to when there's something that I really don't understand. And, that's not to say think about making friends so that you can eventually get something out of them 10 years out of the line, right? Build meaningful relationships with them. But I wish one of the things that I had done as a freshman was really understand that, that's really what's going to be super valuable once you leave, NYU or just finish school, right? Is who are the people that you actually got to know? Who did you build really memorable experiences with while you were there? And possibly even worked on something together, right? That's one of the beauties of Tech and NYU as a whole is that you're all makers, right? You're all building stuff together and you're doing it in a way that's really scrappy and really emblematic, I think, of a lot of the values that the technology industry really does value. So I'd say that that's one thing that I would have gone back to my freshman self more. And it's like, you're making friends, make more of them, think more about how you can connect with people, think about that a lot more.
Gaurav, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just wondering what your opinion was about like no code tools. Like there are so many no code tools coming like to make like websites and like apps also now. So how do you think like a role of a developer is going to change over the next few years, given that there are so many ways to democratize these web technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the eternal sort of like questions that people are going to have around abstraction, right? Because when you talk about software engineering and, you always talk about trade-offs. And when you're talking about no-code tools or similar sort of like trade-offs, it ends up being a trade-off between sort of flexibility and control versus sort of like simplicity and speed, right? The easier something is, the quicker you can sort of get something out of the door. That means that you're clearing away, you're getting rid of a lot of the choices and decisions that you need to make in order to get the thing that you want, right? So take Squarespace, for example, which is probably something that a lot of you are familiar with. For those of you that aren't, it's a place that allows you to build a website for, things like a shop or maybe a portfolio or, a small business, right? That allows somebody to build a website that's functional with like a shopping cart and an about me page and photos and galleries really, 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 really quickly, right? The trade-off that you have there, though, is that you don't get a lot of flexibility with what it is that you want because you had to trade in all of that flexibility and control for, speed, essentially, right? If you want something really, really quick, really, really cheap, you're going to have to sacrifice some of the control that's there. The same thing goes the other way around, though, right? And this is where places like Stack Overflow, places that are hiring engineers, really want to focus on. We want as much flexibility and control over the kinds of things that we're building here, even if it might be more expensive and it might take more time here, right? And another way of framing this question is, okay, so what are no-code tools going to do? No-code tools, I think, are going to be fantastic but they may still have to limit the amount of control or flexibility that you can get out of it, right? At some point, you're going to outgrow the ability of a certain tool to give you what it is that you want, right? So no-code tools have more and more capabilities, right? And I think the really interesting question is there a place where no-code tools are so sophisticated that you actually don't have a trade-off anymore between how quickly you can get something done and how much control you get over the kinds of things you want to build, right? I don't know. I'm still firmly of the belief that you're going to need people, at least until the machines figure out how to learn and be creative and all of that fun stuff. If there's anything that's further down the line that I'm more afraid of when it comes to opportunities for developers and engineers, it is more machine learning than no code tools. You might even see an intersection of those two things come together. But until that kind of things happen, I don't think that there's ever going to be a, I don't think that there's going to be a scenario where engineers are going to be obsolete anytime soon, at least not within our lifetime. This is being recorded, so this may actually get played back to me in like 5 years, and I'll have to pay for it later on. But I really think of engineering and the work that we do as coding is not just about shipping code. So much of being a good engineer is about really understanding requirements, being in conversation with other developers. Really, it's a very human social activity to code. And if that isn't going to be, ultimately, I don't think that's going to be replaced anytime soon, certainly not by no-code tools, but who knows? Things are changing so quickly that might actually be the case. In the end, there's a trade-off there. I don't think that trade-off is going to go away necessarily anytime soon. And if that's the case, engineers are going to go away. And engineers are really going to be there because they're human. I think that building, coding, building applications, building things with technology is inherently a creative human skill, at least for now.
So I had a question about unpaid internships, because I know like they're kind of floating around a lot, and especially with startups in New York, they feel like they're very accessible to students at NYU. What are your opinions on taking unpaid internships?
Yeah. My quick answer is don't take them. You are worth far more than free, especially when it comes to the kinds of skills that you have, right? And there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, one, just because I think that it's wrong for people to take on jobs that are not paid, even if it does something like give you a credit or something else like that. Engineers and developers are in very, very, very high demand. Right. The last time that I checked, I remember Stack Overflow did a survey on this. There's probably 5 developer jobs for every developer that exists right now. And if they're not willing to pay you, it's probably not going to be a good place to work either. Because if you think about what the mentality is of an unpaid internship, it is we want to have you work. We don't want to pay you. And how do you think that's going to reflect in the culture, as well as how they're going to take care of you once you're actually through the door, right? That's probably not going to be a place that you're going to want to stay in, and you're probably not going to be very happy in a scenario like that. Now, it's different if you're talking about, say, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos decided to quit their jobs and start a startup, and they have an internship, and they're not going to pay anyone for it just yet. I don't see why that would actually be the case, but that might be an interesting opportunity for you to take on. But otherwise, it's something that I really would not, even entertain, even for someone who's a student right now. Like I said, you are in demand. And one of the really interesting things about being in this space right now is that the traditional sort of like job search and the market for that is essentially inverted in technology, especially if you're an engineer right now, more so than any other industry. I think a lot of other, if you're talking about almost any other industry, a lot of it will feel like companies have these coveted jobs that they're only going to dole out to a few select people that are out there. That's not what it's like if you're an engineer or somebody that's in the technology space anymore. There's such a high demand for people with the skills that you have that there's no reason, I think, that you should be taking an unpaid internship or any unpaid labor for that matter, right? And I will also throw this line in there, especially if you are coming from an underrepresented group or from a historically marginalized group, right? There is absolutely no reason you should be doing labor for free. There are plenty of places that will pay you for that work because you're worth that work.
Garong, do you have another question, or is your hand still up from before?
Anyone else have anything else? Okay, cool. Well, I think we ended up just about 15 minutes early, but hey, if any of you ever want to chat with me, like I said, Tech NYU has been a really important part of my life when I was at NYU, but it continues to be right now. I see a few familiar faces that are here already, so some of you already have my contact information, but Andrew, maybe if we could send that out to other folks or make sure that contact info gets out to others, I'm more than happy to chat with you about whatever your individual situation is or give you some more guidance here. More than happy to help.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Be here from